Hey guys, welcome to my channel where we discuss anything and everything about mental health and psychology. In this video, finally, we will be going through KSA 12, which focuses on self-reflection and self-evaluation. So let's get straight into it. So what you need for this section is a self-statement and a reference written by a referee. So it's a little bit different to the countersigned self-statements that are within the other sections. So it's almost like a statement that the reference needs to write, showing that you have the self-reflective ability and the self-evaluative ability to be able to have the competence to be a therapist. So let's go into the self-statement section. And again, like the videos, these are just tips. They're not things that you have to write about. They're not things that are required to write about. They're just ideas. And obviously, if you have other ideas or other experiences that you think would be good within this section, add it. If you don't like any of the tips that I've given you, you can just leave them out. So what I started with within this section was I spoke about how my experience developed. So I spoke about my first experience being exposed to self-reflection and self-evaluation. So I spoke about how I was first exposed to it within year 11 and how I was encouraged to keep reflective diaries. I then spoke about how this had been developed throughout my experience. And I spoke about how it had developed through education, because I did philosophy and ethics, which is very analytical and very reflective. So I spoke about how that had developed. And then I went into talking about how my self-reflection had developed within psychology, specifically focusing on my undergraduate degree. Then building on this, then I spoke about how after graduation within the workplace, I was encouraged to self-reflect and evaluate myself. And I spoke about how I had benefited from this and the value that I had seen within this. And then here I also refer to self-reflective models that are encouraged within psychology and the ones that I had been exposed to. I think this is particularly useful, especially if you've worked in other areas that are not assistant psychologist or related directly to psychological models. I think it's good to think about, if you've been a healthcare assistant, what nursing reflective models have you come across? If you've worked within physical healthcare, what reflective things did they have? For example, they might have learning bites that encourage you to reflect on your ability and your work, and you might have had group reflections. So for example, if you had worked in A&E before, they have a huddle every morning talking about maybe reflective points that they've learnt from maybe incidences that have happened or cases that maybe complex cases that they've discussed. They always had, well, in the A&E I worked in, they always had learning bites at the start of each meeting and maybe what you learnt from that. But just reflect on your experiences and think of what workplace reflections have you participated in. And if you work in an inpatient, one of the common ones you'll come across is debriefs. I don't know whether it's a regular thing in other organisations, but the ones I've worked in, after an incident, we've regularly had debriefs. So that might be something that you want to focus on. But remember, it's from your own experiences. So really reflect on your experiences, the places you've worked in, the almost field you've worked in. So if you've got experience outside of psychology, outside of mental health, and within a completely different field, like in a business field, or if you're changing careers, think of, okay, what previous jobs have I done that required me to reflect? And I think this all adds up into your self-reflective ability getting deeper and developing over time. Then I reflected on my ability, so my limitations and my strengths, and I used an example where this was really useful for me. So what I learned, what qualities did I have that enabled me to do that? Does that make sense? So I spoke about being very aware of my limitations and actually the usefulness of being very aware in a very reflective way. Because sometimes when you think about your limitations, it can make you feel down and it can make you feel self-critical, and those things are not good for your self-esteem and can sometimes lead to avoidance. So it can be, okay, maybe the stance that you took on your limitations, maybe it fed your curiosity to learn more, maybe it motivated you to seek training opportunities. So talk about how it's affected you, and if it's led to burnout before, be very aware of that and reflect on that experience. So even within this, you're showing your reflective ability because you're reflecting on your reflection and you're reflecting on your experience. So I think it's really good just to demonstrate your reflective ability. And that's exactly what I did. So I reflected on my practice, I reflected on my ability to reflect, and then I also spoke about how I've used therapeutic skills and therapy skills on myself to be able to not only enhance my practice of therapeutic skills, but also how I've personally benefited from it. So I spoke about my use of supervision, about my use of personal therapy, of my use of the resources around me, and even self-practice. So there's something called, if you've never reflected in a therapeutic way before, there's something called self-reflection, self-practice. And what it does is you formulate yourself. And I also went into self-formulation in the next section. So I'm really linking my paragraphs together, and it shows the development of my reflective ability, and it just adds almost like layers. Does that make sense? So it shows how deep my reflective ability is. And I think that's something that you can demonstrate. So if you haven't self-reflected before, or you haven't self-formulated before, maybe before doing this self-statement, maybe try it. And I'll link a useful resource, or like put a reference somewhere here, of a useful resource to help you self-reflect and self-practice. And it's obviously something that is so readily available that I'm sure you can find an article on it. If I do find some, I'll put it in the description. So then I spoke about my self-formulation. I spoke about the influence that it had on me. For example, formulating yourself, like formulating clients, is very difficult. And I spoke about the barriers that I faced while doing self-practice. And I also spoke about how it actually deepened my appreciation for clients when they come in. And I know about the barriers that they face, and I know how difficult it can be. So I've stepped into the client's shoes. Then I also spoke about the influence of my biases and my values on my practice, and how being aware of them helped me to be able to manage them. So then again, coming into the supervision, the debriefs, the being doing personal reflections myself, and being aware of the potential impact. So being aware of biases, values, and how they can influence my practice actually made me minimize their effects. And in other cases where your values are adding to your practice, also highlight that. Does that make sense? So my awareness of using cultural adaptations on my own self-reflections actually enabled and enhanced my ability to reflect on other people's values, other people's cultures, their experiences, and how that can lead to actually enriched formulations. Does that make sense? So can you see how your self-reflections are actually adding to your practice? Then it comes on to my next point, where I spoke about why it's actually really useful to do. And within that, I also spoke about, again, the influence of my own self-reflections on my practice. And I spoke about it's actually useful for me to be able to self-practice because I can further explore and further acknowledge the barriers that other people might face. So other clients might face, the things that might get in the way of using those skills on yourself when I'm trying to encourage patients and getting them to think differently, and especially when there's some resistance, being able to work with that resistance. I also spoke about what would happen and the detrimental effects of not evaluating yourself and not reflecting on your competence and yourself as a person. I spoke about the potential limitations in your knowledge, and not acknowledging them can actually be detrimental to your practice. I also spoke about not being reflective and not acknowledging the impact of your practice on you can actually also lead to detriment. So I went really into talking about why it's important as a therapist to be able to reflect on your practice and the implication it has for yourself, for your practice, and just for your development as a whole. I then ended by going into two very detailed examples. So one was an example where my limited knowledge about a disorder impacted my practice and my ability to support the people that I was working with. I then spoke about how acknowledging that gap in my knowledge actually enhanced my practice and actually grew my curiosity, grew my interest within that area. And then my second example focused on how my biases and my personal experiences impacted my ability to support a service user. And I spoke about how my own frustrations on me not being able to get over my own biases, my own experiences, and my biases and personal experiences actually came from a moral dilemma I had based on something that they had done, and how I overcame that to be able to support that person, and how I worked through my frustration, worked through my own issues, and worked through my own experiences to be able to put myself in that person's shoes, especially when I acknowledge the difference between sympathy and empathy. And to really feel empathetic towards someone, you need to walk alongside them. Does that make sense? But what I felt like my biases and my personal experiences were doing was creating a wall between us where I couldn't truly immerse myself in that experience of supporting that person. Does that make sense? So that's it for the video, guys. Hopefully it was useful and helps you complete your KSA. We're nearly at the end. And also, if you would like me to make any more KSA videos, please let me know in the next few weeks, just so my YouTube is in order, so all the KSA videos are together. And yeah, because the 14th KSA is just a CV. So if you want me to make a video on that, I can. What kind of things to try, what kind of experiences are relevant. If you want me to do that, I can do that. If not, I can make a video on the 13th KSA and then we'll be done. Finally, I feel like this, well, my videos have been going on for a very long time. But yeah, finally it's over. If you've got to this video, you've got one more KSA left and then it's over. And then you never have to look at the KSA ever again, hopefully. Yeah, so if you want me to make another video or any overview, summaries, advice videos, please let me know down in the comments. If not, I am going to be moving on. So yeah, that's it for my rambling for this video. And if you like the video, give the video a like. Comment if you benefit from this video, you want me to expand on any points, you have any questions, queries, concerns, please leave them down in the comments and I'll reply to you as soon as possible. And if you feel like someone else is struggling, just be kind and share this series with them. Even if they're not, just tell them to give me views and, you know, subscribe to my channel. But yeah, anyway, hopefully this video was useful and I hope to see you in the next video.